Now, political parties, support groups, and many citizens of the country are all preparing for the 2023 elections with campaigns, PVCs collection, all underway. But the Independent National Electoral Commission has lamented the increasing wave of violence and insecurity gearing up to the elections. And they expressed fears that if this is not checkmated, it may lead to the cancellation or postponement of the forthcoming polls. That was expressed by INEC some time ago. But let's look at, on the other hand, INEC or the federal government has come out. In fact, it's been on the papers today when they said that there's no cause for alarm. Now, joining us in the studio is a public affairs analyst, Dikbo Oyewole. He's here. It's nice to have you join us this morning.
Good morning, Mike.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Very good. And we also have a lecturer and political analyst, Adeni Kunu. It's nice to have you join us this morning as well.
Thank you very much.
Great.
It's a pleasure.
And I guess, can I still say Happy New Year?
Oh, yes.
Yes, of
The
course.
year is getting old a little bit. He's still young there.
Yes, it is.
All right. Now, let's get to the discussion. I believe we've been following developments where INEC was raising the alarm and raising the consciousness of the information from especially seeing the level of attacks on INEC offices in some states, especially we can't forget Imo State. There were recurrent attacks like that on INEC offices in Imo State, and then some of the facility and equipment burnt, destroyed, vandalized, and so on. And INEC has come to say that, well, if this is not checked, then it might affect the election as it is. But just yesterday, the Minister of Information, speaking on behalf of the federal government, assured the country and Nigerians that there's no cause for alarm. There's nothing to fear. Everything is going as planned. But let me start with you, Adini. What do you make of this, though? Because Nigerians are talking.
Well, I think that INEC overreached itself by re-emphasizing that the elections will not hold. That is one thing that I've found out. Section 153F, talking about the Constitution, already gave a stipulation of what INEC is all about. So one of their roles is not to cancel a major election, is to oversee the conduct of an election. And if one did a proper checking of the rule books that guide INEC, one of their roles is not to prevent an election from holding. Of course, if an election is held, INEC has the powers to cancel a held election, but not to outrightly not allow election take place. But at the same time, let's remember that since 2015, we've had back-to-back postponement of elections. Jonathan by 2 weeks. Under the Jega, we've had the person who took over from him also. He postponed in 2019. People do not understand. Yes, of course. I think that the helmsmen do not quite understand the economic implications for postponing elections. We have about a month of people's sources of income held up because the election takes precedence, as you must agree with me, over every other thing. But if you check, INEC sounds as if it has the power at the same time to proclaim a state of emergency. Section 305, 1 to 6 of the Constitution stipulates clearly that the government can indeed talk about state of emergency. The state government can also intimate the government about such if it's happening within their territory. So I think that respective government agencies must understand that they are speaking as an arm, not as those who employ them to do services to the nation. And I think INEC must understand that. Let's look at it this way. If INEC is saying that the state of security in those places are so bad that elections may not hold, then what is federal government, the parent body, doing that it has not been able to identify these problems that are so much such that it is not calling state of emergency? Because if you look at it, INEC is telling you there's a state of emergency. As a result of that, you can't have an election. So I think that the federal government must begin to do crash courses on how it informs people so that they don't speak from different parts of the mouth. Emefiele went ahead and said you can't have such amounts withdrawn per day, whereas there is a Money Laundering Act that stipulates certain amounts. Who is in the legal department of the CBN? The CBN is an arm of the federal government. Who do they have to do their jobs that they are not aware of the respective guidelines for even issuing prevention or allowances for people to spend money? So across the agency of governments, there needs to be a reinvention of how information is processed, managed, then disseminated, so that we can have a coherent system of managing things such as we have seen. So for INEC, INEC should stop telling us about not having an election. Rather, the federal government, as Alhaji Lai Mohammed has said, has actually taken a step further to say, we are in charge. There wouldn't be such, because it would. Because the same INEC, October of 2022, I told the world that the insecurity situation won't prevent them from having an election. November, December, 305 billion, with an increment of about 10 billion to their own yearly budget, making it 50 billion. INEC is telling us, no, they will conduct that election.
I think I like the way you must conduct this election.
You must conduct it.
Because when it comes to the funds,
Yeah.
in fact, INEC is one agency in this country that gets almost everything they demand every time.
Nobody wants to be held responsible.
So you don't want to say,
You will speak, but let's play this report.
Okay.
Before I come to you,
All right.
there's this report I was supposed to play earlier on. Let's have it played so that it gives us a perspective and context to what we are saying.
Tension continues to rise ahead of Nigeria's general elections scheduled for February this year, 2023. Reports of violent attacks on individuals and INEC facilities across the country have sparked up genuine concerns among the electorate and officials of the electoral body who fear that the attacks may affect the schedule of the elections. But the federal government has continued to reassure Nigerians that it has everything under control and there is nothing to fear. At the 17th edition of the President Muhammadu Buhari scorecard series, Nigeria's information minister insists the elections will hold as scheduled.
The position of the federal government remains that the 2023 elections will be held as planned. Nothing has happened to change that position. We are aware that INEC is working with the security agencies to ensure that the elections are successfully held across the country. The security agencies have also continued to assure Nigerians that they are working tirelessly to ensure that the elections are held in a peaceful atmosphere. Therefore, there is no cause for alarm.
All right, that was the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, addressing, at an event in Abuja yesterday, assuring Nigerians that the elections will hold. All right, I still have Adeni Kuno and Dikbo Oyewole in the studio. We're looking at the dimension of this issue, but let's go on a short break, and then we come back for Dikbo to react to some of the discussions and saying things we're talking about here. You're watching TVC Breakfast. On this segment, we have been looking at the alarm raised by INEC that if insecurity is not curtailed, that the general election in 2023 might be postponed in some areas or even cancelled. But the federal government has assured that there is no cause for alarm, that the election will hold as scheduled. And I have in the studio Adeni Kunu as well as Dikbo Oyewole, and we are looking at this issue. Now, Dikbo, let me come to you on this. Beyond the realities, because when we talk about the realities of insecurity, of course,
yes,
it's all over the place. Everyone has just been talking about the train attack now in Edo State, and all of that. In some other states there are issues of, scoops of kidnappings here and there and attacks. So the reality of insecurity is there. However, coming to the platform of election, it's totally a different discussion altogether. And we know how conscious government is when it comes to deploying security, deploying funds, deploying intelligence during election periods. Now, do you think beyond the realities of insecurity, there was something wrong with, or something not right with the communication pattern that INEC had sent out regarding the issue of this election postponement?
Well, for me, I believe that they were trying to save face. Should, in case anything happened or happens during the elections, then they will go back and say, remember in January, we raised an alarm. And then you people said we were alarmists. But for me, I believe it should go more than that because, yes, I mean, Elijah Mohammed came out yesterday to say that there's no cause for alarm, elections will hold. Yes, that is part of the things they should do, but more than that, with the things they need to have on ground in terms of the security agencies being at full alert. Because we also need to understand that deploying security agencies shouldn't just be focused on the period when the elections are holding, on the days when elections are holding. We also need to understand that there's a certain time frame before the elections where sensitive materials are being transported from one place to the other. They're going to be making use of a lot of youth corps members. Different personnel are going to be in place. Resources are going to be in place, both human and material. We need to ensure
there are even election observers who are coming from different parts of the world.
So we need to ensure that everyone is safe and also the voters as well. So the issue of insecurity isn't just about the elections. It's a holistic matter, which is something that we talk about here every other time, that it doesn't just affect one thing, it affects everything. And when we're able to solve it, we solve the myriad of problems that we have right now. Now, if, for example, if we had tackled the issue of insecurity, maybe this conversation will be coming up. But going back to INEC saying that they will likely cancel or postpone the elections, one, per their charter, they cannot do that in the Electoral Act. They don't have the powers to do that. And even in the Constitution, nobody has the power to do that, not even the court of law. Because in the Constitution, I believe Section 134(2) in the Constitution says that, I'll paraphrase, now to hold elections for the office of the president, it has to hold not earlier than 180 days and not later than 30 days before the expiration of the office of the last office holder. So you want to cancel, you want to postpone, what time frame are you looking to have that done? But what I see happening is possibly, before the end of this week, I mean, it's still morning on Wednesday right now, before the end of this week, maybe the National Assembly calls the INEC chairman, have a conversation, come and explain, and then maybe he then says, maybe we need more money, or maybe we need more support. Maybe we need more support.
I'm suspecting.
Don't worry. I'm not collecting my share out of it.
You can predict all of these things already.
Say I need more money and saying, okay, you know what, I don't have any authority over the security agencies. You need to assist them a lot more, but we need more money because we've had a lot of facilities damage, which we've talked about a lot about that last year, where they had offices bombed, burnt, materials, some personnel hurt, and then National Assembly says, okay, because they also don't want to be held responsible, because if you don't give them the money they're asking for, they will say it's the National Assembly, which you said earlier that is one body that gets whatever they want, because nobody wants to be at the short end of the stick saying that it's your fault that we couldn't hold credible elections. So don't come and tell us that, okay, we don't have the confidence that we'll be able to hold credible elections. And then after you have a conversation this week, you come 2 weeks to election, I still tell a story. Whatever the issues are, let us know them now. Whatever you need, let us know them now. But the elections, they must hold as at when stipulated. All
right. Now, Adeni, do you, when you look at Nigeria, from crisscrossing states, all the states, and from some of the reports you're hearing, what areas do you think, if at all, INEC is going to, or the security agencies working together with INEC is going to say, okay, pay attention to this state, pay attention to, what states do you think that there should be more concern or more, better consciousness regarding security?
The Southeast is a troubled region as we speak. I was there when they had the November elections. That should be 2021. That resulted in, the leaving of office of Willie Obiano. And,
in Anambra State.
Yes, Anambra State. And I can tell you that when we got to, that was after Onitsha, moving towards Imo State. At some point, we got out of the vehicle, we had to raise our hands, security people everywhere. I do not think the country should be such that people are not able to live their lives. There is something called the freedom of movement enshrined in the nation's constitution. So you'd expect that people should have that freedom, body, soul, and spirit, to go about their daily businesses, albeit peacefully. What are the disaffections, really? Because at times you just want to look at things on the periphery, and the peripheral approach doesn't help us. Then later it becomes a reactive, mediative approach, which affects us. It is very fundamental that we look at the regions of the country that are troubled, and within the context of this conversation, the Southeast. What are the things that have culminated in the evidence dissidence that we see in the Southeast? How is it that despite all the so-called, prevention of the proliferation of arms and all the conventions we are signatory to, you can still get a bullet in Benin City for 500 naira? These are realistic things that I'm saying in the studio this morning. It means that people themselves are disenchanted and separated from that leadership that should help them understand that you are there for us. So government should start looking at what it says and what it does. It's not peculiar to the Buhari administration. I'm putting in perspective the Fourth Republic and how leadership should start looking at the areas where there are problems. Anytime there are problems, for instance, it doesn't mean it has to be high-handed force to quell it. Something brought about that problems. We've said it time and again that most of the people that, are conscripted by Boko Haram are conscripted because, number one, the harrowing pangs of poverty is there. Lack of education is there. Lack of exposure. Not saying that life is so precious to live and you've got to live it right. So when people do not understand the basics and the value of the life they have, they are easy tools in the hands of those who want to perpetrate wickedness. The same in the Southeast. People get killed because once you are a dissident and you are defined constituted authority, there is a law protecting them to protect other people who are more in numbers. So the southeastern part of the country and the leadership in this country needs to have a serious sit-down conversation approach regarding the things that are happening. How can people, for instance, be in a country where they have governors under the leadership and the authority of a Nigerian constitution, yet many are saying they don't belong to that country? I've had some people from the Southeast region call this country zoo, even very educated people who disappointedly should be leading those regions. My father gave my elder sister to a man from Imo State. So as long as I live, I have a stake in the southeastern part of the country. So it hurts me that for instance, nieces and nephews and things like that are from a region of the country and there's so much disaffection. So I think that we must speak against first the killings of people who are trying to exercise their franchise, because in the course of attacking INEC offices, they've also destroyed people's lives and they have destroyed people's property. That I will never condone. You cannot take people hostage because you are not happy about what the government is doing. Then the government must also understand the carrot and stick approach to solving this problem. It is obvious that a lot of people there, especially youth that are supposed to be, depositing their energies for reward-oriented purposes, they are using it to maim, to kill. So we have to look at that. Then thirdly, why and how do they get such sophisticated weapons? Because these are things we don't want to talk about. There's the particular documentary, The Bandits of Zamfara, that was everywhere months ago in 2022. This young man said, well, he had given his ammunition that he doesn't want to be part of those causing problems. But later when he found out that the guarantee of protection of his life and family is nowhere, he went back to Niger and Chad to get his brand new AK-47. So you look at it, we're talking about the interaction around the Sahel region with the leadership of that area. What are we doing that the president is able to speak with leaders across the West African plate that this violence will consume all of us? Can we prevent this? So the more government tries to curb certain things, the more we see people come from the others. So the southeastern region is a region that we should focus on. Don't forget, a lot of people from a recent poll held by NOAA polls, initially people who thought they would participate in the election, they are undecided. And when people are not deciding about participating in what is their civic responsibility, that itself is a problem. That people who are very diligent in researching issues are able to look at it. Why are people suddenly losing faith in the system? Why do they not want to be part of the process that will establish leadership that can help galvanize the change we desire? So these are the realities, I must say.
Okay, now, Dick, what the point there is with INEC, let's dissect it differently.
Okay.
INEC is not the agency that provides infrastructure for anybody. INEC is not the agency of government that disseminates goodies or relief materials to anybody. INEC is not the agency that collects taxes from anybody. For somebody to hold grudges against INEC to say, oh, they were the ones who prevented us from doing this or doing that. INEC is just an agency to come periodically, conduct elections, and move. Now, for anybody, single person or group of people to think that, let us attack INEC for any reason whatsoever, could send signals that maybe some persons don't want elections to hold. Would it be, if somebody makes that kind of conclusion that some groups don't want election to hold, would that be right?
Yes, I believe it would, because in the end, who stands to gain from these attacks on the INEC offices and infrastructure? It's the political class. I'm not going to benefit from it. Are you going to benefit from it? It's the political class.
So it's
that
like
have a stake in the outcome.
People who would say, well, if I'm not going to get this, so let's just spoil everything.
They just spoil everything. So it's still within the political class, because they are the ones that have the actual stake in INEC carrying out their duties, for better or for worse for them. Because in the end, like I said, I mean, aside from maybe I get to vote in somebody that I believe would get the job done, and then I have to live with the consequences of it after, the people who are really desperate about it are the ones involved in this. So how about to take a look at the political class and see who are the people that stand to benefit from elections not holding in certain parts of the country, if not in all of the country. So that's where the conversation should start from, because it will not just happen in isolation. People don't just do things on a whim. So let's say maybe one was maybe a mistake or maybe misguided. How about 2, 3, 4, 5, a dozen? That's calculated. So that is what we need to take a closer look at, the political class and those who stand to benefit from this violence and the possibility of elections not holding. Because, I mean, for a lot of people know that this 2023 elections will be a huge decider to the nation, to the future of this nation on so many levels. So yes, a lot of people are very desperate to ensure that either they get it or no one does. But that cannot stand, because in the end, we are still an independent people with sovereignty and our own constitution that guides us. So that must be our guide. That's why we have a constitution. That's why every country has a constitution. So what does the constitution say? Because these are people that are threats to our democracy. They are threats to our freedom. And what do you do to people that threaten your freedom and threaten your way of life? You deal with them. So if we're being serious about it and this issue of insecurity, investigations will have been carried out aggressively, with all these INEC offices being attacked, bombed, burnt, and all of that. A lot of investigation ought to have been carried out, and certain persons should have been held to account if we are being very serious about these conversations. But somehow it always looks like we just look at things and we don't take them as seriously as we ought to. And I believe that's part of the reasons why the INEC official that came out to say, okay, you know what, this thing may not hold, it may hold. That's why I said earlier that they're trying to save face. Because, I mean, like you rightly said, just in October last year, they came out and say, okay, you know what, the Northeast, the Northwest and Southeast, troubled areas where elections will still hold, we have everything that we need, we'll get more money and ensure that this thing holds. And in January, it's looking like, you know what, peradventure, something happens. So we're not the ones you burn at the stake. Maybe in the National Assembly we're going to meet for money, they don't want to give us money, or the federal government that has refused to talk, which they have also countered it yesterday, which was an intelligent thing for them to do. So now the question is, who does the box stop with? What does it stop? Who's going to be responsible for any possible postponement or cancellation? Who are the people who are going to hold responsible and say that you are the one that is threatening our way of living? So these are the things we need to look at. Who are the people that stand to gain from these criminal activities and what are we doing about it? Because we must be very serious about it and must be aggressive about it. Once our elections are tampered with on that scale and it goes unabated, then as a people, I believe we are in trouble.
Okay. Now, Adini, the point there is that the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, came out yesterday to make clarifications and then give assurance to the country by saying that elections will hold as scheduled. You know, we're deploying security agencies and all of that. Of course, that's a statement.
Okay.
Now, the people will still try to permutate or try to decipher all of that, juxtaposing it against their own realities, especially the Southeast that you mentioned earlier.
please.
So is a statement like that enough to calm the nerves of Nigerians or allay the fears or panic of anybody to say, okay, since the Minister of Information has said it's okay, let's wait for elections? Is that okay?
No, if you have 10 items that troubled or is supposed to trouble the elections coming, you know, just 40-something days away, I think Alhaji Lai Mohammed only took 2 out of 10 problems off the table. There's hope coming from government, the federal government, that there'll be an election, and perhaps a consolidation of that statement made is what is expected. So 2 problems out of 10, you're still less than half. It is very key for government to understand certain realities. The major players amongst our security forces during elections are police officers. For every staggered election, for instance, this year, November 11, particularly Kogi, Imo, Bayelsa, will be having staggered election with a budget of about 2.6 billion. Now, for each of that election, you have a deployment of about 12,000 to 10,000, minimum of 10,000. In fact, you can have as much as 20,000. And why? Kogi has a history of election violence. Imo, of the southeastern state, has actually come shoulders equal with Kogi because of the destruction of INEC offices. I'm talking about the gubernatorial election.
Exactly.
The elections in water areas or aquatic areas, as it were, as Bayelsa, will be needing more hands because people have to cross boats and all of that. So that election ordinarily will be taking a chunk of our police officers. Now, according to records, we have, let me be very generous, 450,000 police force members in this country. Election held where you have over 200 million people. We know that certain topographies in this country are not easy to go to because I served in the north. I've been to certain areas in the north. Some topographies are crazy.
Yeah.
You're going to Lafia, you see the winding roads, just Lafia there. You're going to Kokona, you're going to Kiana, you're going to Awe. Those are interiors that have been needing 1, 2. If you need a policeman in a polling station here, you need about 4 because of that area.
The terrain.
The terrain.
Yeah.
So I'm saying here that let's be realistic. First, the manpower for the nation's police force is too minimal. And we should stop the excuses of no money. If an accountant giant could take 109 billion, make on a let me hear word. So what I'm saying here is we need to reinvent ourselves to understand our obvious limitations. The nation's forces, police officers, are limited in number to cater to the needs of an election. And I need us to see less of military in our elections. Let me tell you, the gradual reconscientization of people into the militarization of our civilian life is something that we should be very careful about. And that is why you find out that even the military at times forgets that their role in civilian issues, such as the election, should be minimal. So the high-handedness, typical of what they bring against the enemies of the nation, is what they at times mete out to civilians that they don't really have the training to deal with, but the police. So first, very limited number of police officers. The statement by the Minister of Information has only allayed little fear. The next thing now is this. Can we see a plan, action, by IG Usman Alkali Baba? Because INEC normally stipulates where it needs the help of military force or police. It is INEC that say, we need you to help us here, here, here. As we speak, non-sensitive materials have been distributed already. Sooner than later, we'll bring you the distribution of those sensitive materials. And that is when the jostle, the violence will begin to increase. The kind of madness that is typical of elections in developing countries. It happens in many other countries, but our own problem first before we talk about others. So going forward, government has done the first thing. We assure you there will be elections. The second, Usman Alkali Baba sitting at a global press conference with Professor Mahmoud Yakub of INEC, the chief of army staff, sitting at a global conference. In fact, if I can have my president there, because let me tell you, this is a national issue, and the president has been assuring us, as said by him, that he will ensure that this election is free and fair. And this is about security of lives and property, and the property of INEC also. So what the president must do, ditto many other persons who are major stakeholders and drivers of this election, is to hold a world press conference and to give us bullet points of what security officers have laid out. We cannot use the regular modus operandi to approach this election.
Okay. Dipo, just in 1 minute before we go, what scenarios do you see going forward as we build up to the election? Campaigns are going on, people are getting PVCs, the politicians are crisscrossing the country, still wooing people for votes and so on. INEC is busy working, security agencies are mapping out here and there, election observers are watching, religious people are praying. So everybody is busy somehow. But what scenarios do you see going forward? And in fact, also there's the bad guys who are on the other side are also trying to see where they can get the best of their, whatever they want to get.
Well, now is the time where INEC needs to do a lot more positive communication to also let people know how to go about voting, either it's online, either it's offline, whatever platform they know to do that. This is the time to start to do it. Get into the rural areas, let people know that they have to vote. There's no such thing as they've counted the votes, they've stolen the vote. You need to come out to vote, get your PVCs. Of course, political parties are doing their campaigns with their candidates. Like he said, this is also the time for the police, most especially, to come out to instill confidence in the hearts of Nigerians. Yeah. That's why it's important that the police is there, the INEC chairman is there, and key stakeholders, so that people can see that they are coming to us in a united front to let us know that, there is no cause for alarm. We are all talking together, not what you have thought erstwhile, that we don't communicate with each other. We have communicated, we have made plans. You need to come out to vote, because another excuse people will give is, the INEC has already said no security, so I'm not coming out to vote because I don't want them to break my head. That's not what we're talking about. So it is the responsibility of all the stakeholders involved to let us know that the elections will be free and fair and they will be safe for Nigerians.
All right. We put our minds together. Let's hope that the elections will hold as scheduled and nothing untoward will happen. Dipo Yewale, thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Adeni Ikunu, thank you very much for coming as well.
Sincere gratitude for bringing me here. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.